Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes today.
Yeah.
We're going on a deep dive into Alexander Solzhenitsyn's
Ugh.
One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich.
Oh, yeah. This one is really something.
This novel,
Yeah.
published in 1962, it really shook the world. It gave readers a first-hand look into the brutal reality of Soviet labor camps
Yeah.
under Stalin's regime.
Yeah, it's remarkable to consider the context. Imagine living in a society where the truth about these camps was largely hidden, and suddenly this raw, an unflinching account bursts onto the scene.
Yeah.
It's no wonder it had such a profound impact.
Absolutely. One day in the life of Ivan Denisovich tells the story of, you guessed it, a single day in the life of Ivan Denisovich Shukhov, a prisoner in one of these camps in 1951. But within that single day, Solzhenitsyn manages to weave in so many powerful themes. We see the constant struggle for survival against hunger and cold, the resilience and resourcefulness of the prisoners, and the small acts of kindness and camaraderie that offer glimmers of hope. But we also encounter the dehumanizing conditions, the arbitrary cruelty, and the psychological toll of long-term imprisonment.
Yeah, and it's important to note that Solzhenitsyn achieves all of this through a very straightforward, almost journalistic style. There's no melodrama, no embellishment. He simply presents the facts of Ivan Denisovich's day, allowing the stark reality to speak for itself.
So, let's walk through that day then, shall we? The story begins with Ivan Denisovich waking up before reveille, already scheming about how to scrounge a little something on the side. What struck me about this opening is that even before we see the full extent of the camp's brutality, we understand the all-consuming preoccupation with basic survival.
Right. That's a great observation. Every action, every thought is dictated by this need to secure the bare necessities. It's a constant battle against the elements, against hunger, against a system that seems designed to strip away their humanity.
And that system becomes immediately apparent when Ivan Denisovich gets punished with 3 days in the cooler, solitary confinement for a very minor infraction.
Oh, wow.
He was feeling ill and overslept, causing him to be late getting out of bed. It just seemed so arbitrary and cruel.
Yeah, this incident underscores the utter lack of justice within the camp system. There's no due process, no real attempt to understand individual circumstances. It's a world where the guards hold absolute power, and the prisoners are at their mercy.
The book really doesn't shy away from describing the physical hardships they endure, the constant cold, the meager rations, the back-breaking labor. We even experience it through Ivan Denisovich's internal monologue, where he describes having to layer up in every piece of clothing he owns just to go outside.
Yeah, that internal monologue is so crucial to the novel's effectiveness. We're not just observing Ivan Denisovich from a distance, we're inside his head, feeling his chills, sharing his anxieties. It makes his small triumphs, like finding a slightly better pair of boots, all the more poignant.
Speaking of those boots, he's forced to hand them in later because prisoners aren't allowed to have 2 pairs. And it's such a small thing, but it speaks volumes about the camp's control over every aspect of their lives.
It's a deliberate strategy of dehumanization. By taking away even these small sources of comfort and individuality, the system seeks to break their spirits and reduce them to mere numbers.
Later in the day, we see Ivan Denisovich and his fellow prisoners in Gang 104 working together to board up the windows of a power plant. They work as a team, drawing on each other's skills, and even manage to find a bit of pride in their work.
It's interesting, isn't it? They're building for the very state that imprisons them, yet they still strive to do a good job. There's a complex mix of defiance and resignation in their attitude. Perhaps it's a way of clinging to some semblance of normalcy, of purpose, in a world that has been turned upside down.
And then there's the episode with the stolen roofing felt. The foreman, Dare, discovers that Tyrion, the gang boss, acquired some roofing felt without permission. To protect the men from the freezing wind, Dare threatens Tyrion with another sentence, and you realize the constant threat of violence that hangs over their heads.
This raises a fascinating question about morality within the context of the camps. Tyrion steals, yes, but he does it to protect his men. Does that make him a hero or a thief? Solzhenitsyn doesn't offer easy answers. He forces us to confront the moral gray areas that emerge in such an extreme environment.
Yeah, it challenges us to consider how our own moral compass might shift under such extreme circumstances. Would we be willing to compromise our principles for the sake of survival? Or
For the well-being of others.
it's a question that haunts you long after you finish the book. Later in the day, we see this play out in a different way. When a package from home arrives for Caesar, a fellow prisoner in Ivan Denisovich's gang, Packages from home were like winning the lottery in the camps. They provided a tangible link to the outside world, a reminder that life beyond the barbed wire still existed.
And yet, there's this bittersweet element to Caesar's package. While it brings him a moment of joy, he ultimately shares very little with his fellow prisoners.
I found that so disheartening. You'd think that in a place like this, where everyone is suffering, they would share more readily. But I guess it shows that even in the most desperate of situations, human nature persists.
Exactly. It reminds us that even in a system designed to erase individuality, people still hold on to their own desires, their own sense of self-preservation. And in a world of scarcity, even the smallest advantage can seem insurmountable.
The novel also explores the spiritual side of things. There's a scene where Ivan Denisovich has a conversation with Elyashka, a Baptist prisoner, about the nature of prayer and faith. It's a moment of quiet reflection amidst all the chaos and brutality.
And it highlights the diverse ways in which people seek meaning and solace in the face of suffering. For Alyosha, it's through his faith. For others, it might be through small acts of resistance, or simply the will to survive another day.
One passage that really resonated with me is when Ivan Denisovich thinks about his life before the camp and how much food they used to eat. Potatoes, kasha, meat. He realizes that in the camp. You can't afford to just shovel food down. You have to savor every bite, every crumb. It really makes you appreciate the simple things we often take for granted.
It's a testament to the power of deprivation to alter our perceptions. Things that were once commonplace become precious, even sacred. And it speaks to the adaptability of the human spirit, our ability to find ways to cope, to find moments of joy, even in the most dire circumstances.
We also see this adaptability in the way the prisoners develop their own systems of exchange and barter. A bit of tobacco, a spare button, a crust of bread. These become valuable commodities in this closed economy.
It's a fascinating example of how human ingenuity can flourish even within the most restrictive environments. They create their own micro-society, with its own rules and hierarchies, all within the larger framework of the camp.
The story doesn't shy away from depicting the psychological toll of long-term imprisonment. Ivan Denisovich reflects on how 8 years in the camps have changed him. He's learned to suppress his emotions, to avoid attracting attention. He's become accustomed to the constant surveillance, the ever-present threat of punishment.
This gradual erosion of self is perhaps the most insidious aspect of the camp system. It's not just about physical confinement, it's about breaking down the individual spirit, their sense of hope, their very identity.
And yet, despite all of this, there are still moments of humor, of tenderness. We see it in the camaraderie between the members of Gang 104 and the way they look out for each other. Share what little they have. We see it in Ivan Denisovich's small acts of defiance, like sneaking an extra bowl of soup or finding a way to sharpen his trowel.
These moments are crucial, I think, because they remind us that even in the darkest of places, the human spirit can endure. They are glimpses of light in a world shrouded in darkness, and they give us a reason to believe that hope, however fragile, can persist.
The ending of the book is both simple and profound. It's just another day for Ivan Denisovich. He returns to the barracks after a long day of work, exhausted but still alive.
And in that seemingly mundane ending, there's a powerful message about resilience, about the ability to find meaning and purpose, even in the most repetitive and dehumanizing of routines.
It's not a happy ending, but it's not entirely bleak either. There's a quiet sense of triumph in Ivan Denisovich's endurance. He has survived another day, and that in itself is a victory.
And I think that's what Solzhenitsyn ultimately wanted to convey, not a tale of despair, but a testament to the indomitable human spirit, its capacity to withstand even the most brutal of circumstances. It's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable suffering, hope can endure, and that even the smallest acts of resistance can have profound meaning.
There's a line towards the end of the book that really struck me. Ivan Denisovich reflects on his sentence and thinks, what you don't pay for, honestly, you don't get good value for. Despite the hardship, he's found a way to maintain his integrity, his sense of self-worth. It's a powerful testament to the idea that even in the most dehumanizing of systems, we still have a choice. In how we respond, it's about holding on to your dignity, your values, even when everything around you is trying to strip them away.
Absolutely. And it makes you question what truly defines freedom. Is it the absence of physical constraints? Or is it something deeper, something that resides within the individual, a kind of inner strength that cannot be broken by external forces?
That's a really thought-provoking question. And I think
Yeah.
it's one that Solzhenitsyn leaves us to grapple with. He doesn't offer easy answers. He simply presents us with the reality of Ivan Denisovich's day in all its mundane detail and allows us to draw our own conclusions.
Yeah, and it's in that ordinariness, I think, that the book's true power lies. By focusing on the minutiae of a single day, Solzhenitsyn makes the unimaginable comprehensible. He forces us to confront the human cost of totalitarianism, not through grand pronouncements, but through the small, everyday acts of survival, resilience, and even quiet defiance.
What does this all mean for us, the readers,
Yeah.
who thankfully haven't experienced the horrors of a Soviet labor camp? What can we take away from this deep dive into Ivan Denisovich's world?
Well, I think Solzhenitsyn's book is a reminder that freedom is precious and fragile, and that it must be constantly guarded. It's a call to empathy, to understanding the experiences of those who have suffered under oppressive regimes. And it's a challenge to never take our own freedoms for granted, to always be vigilant against the forces that seek to erode them.
It also, I think, challenges our assumptions about what it means to be human. We see in Ivan Denisovich and his fellow prisoners a remarkable capacity for adaptation, for finding meaning and purpose in the most unlikely of places.
Right. It makes you realize that the human spirit is far more resilient than we often give it credit for, and that even in the face of unimaginable suffering, there's still room for compassion, for humor, for moments of grace.
One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich is a book that stays with you long after you've finished reading it. It's a story that haunts you, challenges you, and ultimately, I think, leaves you with a sense of hope. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can endure.
And that the fight for freedom, for dignity, is a fight that must be waged every day in both big and small ways.
Well said. If you haven't already read One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, I highly recommend you seek it out. It's a powerful and important story, a testament to the human spirit, and a chilling reminder of the dangers of totalitarianism.
It's a book that everyone should read and reflect on and carry with them as they navigate the complexities of our world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Until next time, keep exploring the world of books and ideas.